Strasbourg. Late December, 1439. The city is freezing. Watch the streets. There is a man running. A servant named Lorenz Beildeck. He is in a full-blown panic. He has every reason to be. His master is in the middle of a complete legal catastrophe. A business partner has just died. The family is suing. The city authorities are asking questions about what exactly is happening inside that workshop. Lorenz runs across town. He reaches the house of an associate named Klaus Dritzen. He bangs on the door. He is gasping for breath. He delivers an urgent, almost coded message from his master. The instructions are incredibly specific. Go to the press. Take the device apart. It has 4 pieces held together by screws. Open the screws. Separate the pieces. Lay them on the floor. The court records give us the direct quote. He had to dismantle it so that no one could perceive its function. They had to make it look like a pile of junk. Random bits of wood and metal. Before we reveal what lay on that floor, welcome to History Titans. If you want to uncover the true stories behind the legends, make sure to like and subscribe right now. Join us as we dismantle history. Back to that cold room in Strasbourg. Lorenz knew the stakes. If anyone, especially the authorities or the Dritzen family, figured out what that machine actually was, it was over. It wasn't just about a trade secret. It would have been seen as dangerous, perhaps even heretical. Sitting there, disguised as scrap metal, was the most dangerous object in all of Europe. It was the prototype for the movable type printing press. And the master giving those panicked orders was Johannes Gutenberg. This is the story they never taught you in school. We all have the mental image. The stately old man, the big beard, standing next to a Bible, looking wise and holy. The patron saint of librarians, the quiet inventor. Erase that image. The man in the Strasbourg court records sounds nothing like a saint. He sounds like a paranoid tech founder from Silicon Valley. He is over-leveraged. He is being sued by his co-founders. He is hiding his prototypes from the repo men. That is Gutenberg. He was not a gentle scholar. He was a disruptor. He was secretive. He was brilliant. He was constantly in court and spent his entire life teetering on the brink of financial ruin. He did it all to protect one technology, a technology he knew would rewrite the entire operating system of human civilization. We are going to reconstruct the life of the man who built it. The irony is palpable. For a man who made it possible to record everything, he left almost no personal record of himself. It is a ghost story. There are no diaries, no letters, no manifestos. We only know him through the legal trouble he was in and the money he owed. We trace him through his debts and the world he completely upended. So we start with the man himself, before the press. Who was he? Even his name is a moving target. Go to his hometown of Mainz, Germany, around the year 1400. Ask for Johannes Gutenberg. People would stare at you blankly. Nobody would know who you were talking about. He was born Johannes Gansfleisch zur Laden. Gansfleisch translates to gooseflesh, Johnny Gooseflesh. It does not sound like a world historical figure, but there was a custom in that part of Germany. Wealthy families were known by the name of the house they lived in. Their family home was the Hof zum Gutenberg, the House of Gutenberg. He adopted the name, better branding. But that name implies status. He was not a peasant tinkerer working in a shed, not even close. This is the most crucial piece of background information you need. He was born into the patrician class of Mainz, the elite, the ruling families, the old money. They controlled the city council. They controlled the trade. Most importantly, they were tied to the mint. His father, Friedrich Gansfleisch, had a specific job. He was a companion of the Archbishop of the Mint. The family business was literally making money. Hang on to that fact. It explains everything. Think about how you make a coin in the 15th century. You do not have an artist individually carve the face of the Archbishop on every single gold coin. You stamp it. You make an impression. You get a piece of hardened steel, a punch. You carve the design into the tip in reverse. Then you hammer that punch into a softer metal to create a die, a mold. You pour molten gold or silver into that mold, or you strike a blank coin between 2 dies. Gutenberg grows up surrounded by this. He breathes the smell of melting metal. He hears the sound of hammers striking steel. He understands the fundamental concept of creating a perfect, repeatable impression. It is in his blood. While the monks in the monasteries looked at manuscripts and thought about moving their quill pens faster, Gutenberg looked at gold coins. He thought, how can I make a tiny little steel punch for every letter of the alphabet? It is a profound shift in perspective. He is not a scribe trying to automate writing. He is a metallurgist. He is an engineer trying to apply the technology of the mint to paper and ink. It is a category error to think of him as a bookman. He is a metal man, a material scientist. That hands-on knowledge of metallurgy is why he cracks the code. But that privileged life in Mainz did not last. The politics of the city in the 1420s became messy. It was a classic class struggle. You had the patricians, Gutenberg's class, the establishment. Then you had the guilds, the craftsmen, weavers, and blacksmiths, the rising middle class. They were doing the work. They were making the money. They were tired of being shut out of political power. They wanted a seat at the table. In Mainz, they did not just ask, they took it. There was an uprising. The guild seized control of the city council. They gave the patrician families an ultimatum: share power and pay more taxes or leave. By 1428, things were too hot for the old families. Gutenberg, likely in his late 20s, became an exile. He leaves his home. He leaves his family's estate. He likely loses access to a good chunk of his inheritance. Where does a man like that go? He heads up the Rhine River. He goes to the free city of Strasbourg, technically modern-day France. This is where the story truly begins. He is not the rich kid anymore. He is a man on the make. He has to hustle, and he does. Between 1434 and 1444, the real Gutenberg emerges from the records. He is not sitting around feeling sorry for himself. He is launching ventures. He is looking for the next big thing. He is a serial entrepreneur. Consider the Great Mirror Venture. It is a story so perfectly medieval, you could not pitch it today. Holy mirrors. It sounds bizarre, but it was a massive market opportunity. Strasbourg is close to the city of Aachen. Aachen was preparing for a massive event, the Great Pilgrimage of 1439. They were going to display the most sacred relics in Christendom: the swaddling clothes of Jesus, the tunic of the Virgin Mary. They expected tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of pilgrims. There was a belief at the time, the holiness of a relic, its grace, was a physical emanation, like light or radiation. If you were near it, you got a dose of grace. But the crowds were huge. You could not get close. So, a popular belief arose. If you held up a small convex metal mirror, you could catch the reflection of the relic. You were capturing its holy emanations. You could close the mirror in a box and take it home. A portable battery of divine grace. A to-go order of holiness. Gutenberg was a skilled metalworker. He saw the business opportunity. He could mass-produce these polished mirrors efficiently. He formed a startup. He brought in local investors, including a man named Andreas Dritzen. They put in cash. They bought lead. They created molds. They cast thousands of these pilgrimage mirrors. They were poised to make a fortune. Then disaster struck. A black swan event. A plague broke out in the region. Then a major flood. The city officials in Aachen made an announcement. The Great Pilgrimage was postponed for 1 full year. It was brutal. A warehouse full of useless inventory. A complete catastrophe. Gutenberg sat on a mountain of unsold mirrors. His investors were furious. So their capital was frozen in metal discs. They wanted their money back. Gutenberg was cornered. So he did something risky. He did something clever. He went to his partners. He told them the mirror money was stuck, but he had another project. A secret one. Something bigger than mirrors. He told them if they extended the partnership, if they put in more cash, he would teach them this secret art. He called it Kunst und Aventur, art and enterprise. He lured them in with the promise of an even bigger score. We only know this because of the lawsuit. Andreas Dritzen, one of the main partners, died suddenly. perhaps from that same plague. His brothers, his heirs, showed up at Gutenberg's workshop. They said their brother invested. They wanted his spot. They wanted in. Gutenberg said absolutely not. It was not just greed. It was extreme secrecy. He knew the value of his invention was tied to how few people knew about it. He argued the contract was with Andreas Dritzen alone. It was not transferable. So the family sued him. It is the best thing that could have happened for history. Without the records from that 1439 lawsuit in Strasbourg, we would know almost nothing about the invention. The documents do not say printing press. He was too careful. They speak in code. They refer to the work, the enterprise. But the witnesses dropped incredible breadcrumbs. A goldsmith named Hans Duna took the stand. He testified that Gutenberg paid him 100 guilders, a huge sum. It was for that which belonged to printing. He used the German word drucken. That is the smoking gun. Another witness mentioned a large press Gutenberg commissioned from a woodturner named Konrad Sassbach. There was talk of forms, huge quantities of lead. Piece it together. You have a press. You have lead for casting. You have forms, which must be the molds. You have obsessive secrecy. By 1439, he clearly had a working prototype. He had the system figured out. This is happening almost 15 years before the famous Bible is printed. There is a huge difference between a prototype in a lab and a full-scale manufacturing operation. A world of difference. We must pause. We must break down the reality of the invention. Most of us have a simplified idea. Gutenberg invented the printing press. Full stop. He made a big stamp. That is not it at all. First, he did not invent printing. The Chinese had been using woodblock printing for centuries. The Diamond Sutra, one of the earliest known printed books, was made in China in 868 AD. Even more amazing, the Koreans had invented movable metal type using bronze back in the 13th century, almost 200 years before Gutenberg. So the big question remains, if the technology existed in Asia, why does Gutenberg get the credit? Why is he the man of the millennium? Is it just Eurocentrism? That is an important question. Part of the answer is the alphabet. Chinese and Korean writing systems use thousands of distinct characters. Movable type is a logistical nightmare when you need a separate bin for 5,000 symbols. The Latin alphabet has 26 letters plus punctuation. It is a system uniquely suited for this technology. But that is not the whole story. The real reason Gutenberg is important is that he did not just invent one thing. He invented an entire system, a manufacturing ecosystem that worked together perfectly. There are 4 key pillars to his invention. First is the metal, the type. This is where his background as a metallurgist is everything. Consider the problem. If you try to cast a tiny letter A out of pure lead, it is too soft. The immense pressure of the press would smash it flat after a few hundred impressions. Iron is too hard. It has a high melting point. It would be difficult and slow to cast thousands of tiny letters. You would need a furnace, not a small crucible. Gutenberg spent years experimenting with alloys. He finally landed on a specific, almost magical recipe. An alloy of lead, tin, and antimony. Antimony is the secret sauce. Almost every metal on Earth shrinks a tiny bit when it cools from liquid to solid. If your molten alloy shrinks inside the mold, it pulls away from the walls. The edges of your letter become rounded. You get a smudge instead of a crisp letter H. But antimony has a rare, strange physical property. It expands slightly as it solidifies. By adding the right percentage of antimony to the lead and tin, Gutenberg created an alloy that did neither. It did not shrink. It did not expand. It was dimensionally stable. It stayed true to the shape of the mold. It gave him a razor-sharp, perfect letter face every single time. That specific alloy, invented through trial and error in a basement in Strasbourg, remained the industry standard for 400 years. He got it perfect on the first try. It is a mark of true genius. Pillar 2 is the real heart of the invention. Even more than the press, the hand mold. The hand mold is the miracle. It makes the whole system scalable. Imagine you were setting up to print a book. You need thousands of letter E's, 1,000 T's. But you have a geometry problem. The letter I is very narrow. The letter M or W is very wide. All of those letters, when cast, have to sit on little rectangular metal blocks. They must fit together perfectly, flush in a line. Crucially, they all must be exactly the same height, down to a fraction of a millimeter. If one is too short, the ink will not touch it. How do you create a mold that can cast a narrow I 1 minute and a wide M the next, while keeping the height and depth absolutely constant? This is his brilliant solution. Imagine two L-shaped pieces of steel. If you slide them together face to face, they form a rectangular shaft, a void in the middle. At the bottom of that shaft, you place your matrix, a little copper block with the impression of the letter. You slide the two L-shaped pieces of the mold closer together for a narrow letter. You pull them farther apart for a wide letter. The width is adjustable. But because of the L shape, the height and depth never change. It is a self-jigging system. A type founder could clamp in the matrix for an I, slide the mold tight, pour the molten metal, and pop out a perfect I. Then swap in the matrix for an M, slide the mold wide, pour, and pop out a perfect M. This adjustable hand mold allowed a single worker to cast hundreds, maybe 1,000 identical, mathematically precise letters in a single day. It was the first real example of mass production with interchangeable parts in history. Without that, the idea is just a cool theory. It is not a practical business. The hand mold unlocks the speed. Pillar 3, the ink. This seems simple. It is not. It is a huge chemical challenge. Scribes for centuries had used water-based ink. It was usually made from oak galls and iron sulfate. It is thin. It flows like water. That flow is exactly what you want for a quill pen on absorbent parchment. But what happens if you try to spread a thin layer of water on a piece of metal, like a coin? It beads up. It does not stick evenly. Surface tension takes over. It pools. It would be impossible to get a consistent coating on metal type. If you tried to print with the scribe's ink, you would get a blotchy, uneven mess. So Gutenberg had to invent a whole new kind of ink from scratch. He looked for inspiration in the arts. The early Renaissance artists in Flanders, masters like Jan van Eyck, were just beginning to perfect the art of oil painting. So Gutenberg made an oil-based ink. He took linseed oil. He boiled it down until it became a thick, viscous varnish. Then he mixed it with lampblack, a very fine, pure carbon soot obtained from burning oil lamps. The result is a paste. It is a thick, sticky black substance, almost like a thin tar. It had the perfect properties. It was sticky enough to adhere beautifully to the metal type, but it would transfer cleanly to the paper under pressure. Another problem solved. This brings us to the last pillar. Number 4, the press itself. Ironically, this is the least innovative part of the entire system. He basically stole the design from something he saw every day. He lived in the Rhineland, a major wine-producing region. He saw the massive screw presses that vintners used to crush grapes and that farmers used to press olives for oil. He adapted that. He took that core concept, a giant screw that can exert enormous slow and even downward pressure, and he modified it. He added a flat plate, called a platen, to press the paper evenly onto the block of inked type. He was not inventing out of thin air. He was a synthesizer. He took the screw from the winemaker, the oil from the painter, the metal punch from the mint. He combined them into something completely new. That is the definition of great innovation, connecting existing ideas in a novel way. He had the technology sorted out during those Strasbourg years, but the lawsuit likely left him broke and exposed. He decided to pack it in and go home. He returns to Mainz around 1448. He is almost 50 years old. He has spent the better part of 2 decades in research and development. He has the method, but to really prove it to the world, he needs to scale up. He needs a huge infusion of capital, a massive amount. He does not want to just print school books. He has a grand vision. He wants to print the Bible. He wants to create a printed book that is so perfect, so beautiful, that it is indistinguishable from the finest hand-copied manuscripts. That kind of project requires a factory, not just a workshop. This brings a new character into the story, the money man, Johann Faust. He's often painted as the villain. That is a little unfair. He was a savvy businessman, a wealthy goldsmith, and lawyer in Mainz. Gutenberg somehow gets a meeting with him and pitches his crazy idea. Against all odds, Faust bites. He bites hard. The first loan Faust gives him is for 800 guilders. Put that number in perspective. A master craftsman in Mainz at the time might earn, if he was lucky, 30 or 40 guilders in a whole year. You could buy a very nice stone house for 100 guilders. 800 guilders is serious venture capital. It is factory building money, and it is not an investment in the modern sense. It is a loan. A loan with his equipment put up as collateral at a standard 6% interest. It is a high-risk, high-reward bet for Faust. They set up the new workshop, the Hof zum Humbrecht. The team grows. It is not just Gutenberg anymore. Faust brings in a crucial third partner, a young man named Peter Schoeffer. Schoeffer was a skilled scribe and calligrapher. He had studied in Paris. He was an artist who understood typography and page layout. He eventually marries Faust's daughter, becoming part of the family. You have the perfect startup team. Gutenberg is the lead engineer, the CTO. Faust is the investor, the CFO. Schoeffer is the chief design officer. Schoeffer is there to guarantee the aesthetic quality, to make sure the final product looks beautiful. Gutenberg is there to make the machines run. But they do not just dive headfirst into printing the Bible. They need to generate cash flow. They have to keep the lights on. They start with smaller, more commercial projects. They print dozens of copies of the Donatus, the standard Latin grammar textbook used in every school. High volume, guaranteed market, the cash cow. Then they print something else, indulgences. It is one of the great ironies of history. The very first thing mass-produced by the printing press was the exact document that Martin Luther would later use the press to attack. At that moment, the Pope was trying to raise money for a war against the Ottoman Turks. The church was selling these printed slips of paper that promised forgiveness for sins. They needed thousands of them printed quickly. It was the perfect job for Gutenberg's press. It was basically printing forms, administrative work, but it paid the bills. It bought more lead, more paper. It paid the wages for the workmen. Because the main project, what they called the work of the books, the Bible, was a financial black hole. It was devouring money. The production of the 42-line Bible ran from roughly 1452 to 1455. The sheer scale of it is hard to comprehend. It was a true industrial enterprise. When scholars estimate they had as many as 20 people working in the shop. Typesetters, pressmen, ink makers, paper handlers. They were probably running 6 presses at the same time. The cost of the raw materials alone must have been staggering. They aimed to print about 180 copies in the first run. Roughly 135 of those were on paper, but about 45 of them were printed on vellum, specially prepared calfskin. It is incredibly durable. It takes ink beautifully, but it is astronomically expensive. Historians have tried to calculate it. To get enough high-quality vellum for 45 copies of the Bible, you would need the skins of somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 calves, an entire herd just for the fancy edition. It is a massive herd. The logistics of acquiring 3,000 to 5,000 perfect skins and preparing them is mind-boggling for a 15th century startup. Then there is the design of the book itself. This is where you see Schoeffer's influence. They were not just stamping letters on a page. They were trying to create an illusion. They were trying to cross the uncanny valley. Gutenberg and Schoeffer knew their target market. They were selling to wealthy monasteries, bishops, and princes. These buyers were used to the beauty and the humanity of a handwritten manuscript. If the printed book looked too rigid, too mechanical, they would reject it as soulless. So how did they make it look human? This is the genius part. Gutenberg did not just cast the 26 letters of the alphabet for the Bible. He designed and cast nearly 300 different characters. 300. He did it for ligatures and alternate characters. When a medieval scribe wrote, He would often combine letters to save space or for stylistic flair. An F and an I might be joined into a single elegant stroke. Gutenberg replicated that. He cast special metal blocks that had phi or est or ct as a single unit, but he went further. He cast multiple versions of the same letter, a slightly wider O, a slightly narrower N. He did this for justification. He wanted the left and right margins of the text to be perfectly straight and even. Modern software does this by altering the space between words. Gutenberg did it by swapping out the letters themselves. If a line was a tiny bit too long, the typesetter could use a few narrower versions of the letters. It fit perfectly. No big ugly gap at the end. That is an insane level of detail. It is artistic, not just mechanical. The result is breathtaking. If you look at a page from a Gutenberg Bible, the color of the text block, the overall density of the ink, is uniform and beautiful. Most experts still consider it the most beautiful book ever printed. Version 1.0 was a masterpiece. The Model T did not look like a Ferrari. The Gutenberg Bible did. He was a perfectionist. He refused to release it until it was absolutely flawless. But perfectionism is expensive. All this time, the investor, Fust, was watching the calendar. He was watching his bank account. Fust had given Gutenberg a second loan of another 800 guilders. The total debt was enormous. The interest was compounding. It is now 1455. The Bibles are finally finished printing. They are sitting in the workshop in unbound sheets. They are ready to be sold at the big Frankfurt trade fair. The payday is right around the corner. That is the exact moment the hammer dropped. Fust goes to court. He sues Gutenberg for the entire amount. Why? Why kill the golden goose right before it lays the egg? It seems self-defeating. Historians have debated this for 500 years. There are two main theories. The first is the hostile takeover. Fust was a ruthless predator. He saw that the difficult, expensive research and development phase was over. He saw the finished product. He knew its value. He decided to push Gutenberg out so that he and his son-in-law, Schoeffer, could reap all the profits. Pure corporate rating. The other theory is more charitable to Fust. It suggests he was a rational lender, terrified by Gutenberg's terrible business sense. The project was years behind schedule. It was massively over budget. There is evidence Gutenberg was using Fust's money to fund side projects. Fust might have thought if he did not foreclose now and seize the assets, Gutenberg would spend the profits on his next crazy scheme. Fust feared he would never see his money back. We will never know his true motive, but we know what happened. They went to court. We have the document, the Helmsberger notarial instrument. It is the record of the verdict. Fust demands his principal back. The 1,600 guilders plus accrued interest. The grand total comes to 2,026 guilders, an astronomical sum. Gutenberg does not have the cash. His entire net worth is sitting in those stacks of printed paper. Gutenberg tries to argue. He claims the second 800 guilder payment was an investment for mutual profit, not a standard loan. He argues Fust was an equity partner. The court does not buy it. The court rules in favor of Fust. It is a death blow. To satisfy the judgment, Gutenberg is forced to turn over the entire workshop. He loses the presses. He loses the tools. He loses the specially made type. And he loses the Bibles. He loses the entire inventory. Imagine the devastation. You spend 20 years of your life on a single project. You invent a world-changing technology. You create a work of art. On the very day it is ready to launch, your partners take it all. They change the locks. It gets even worse. Fust and Schoeffer immediately take over the business. They finish binding the Bibles. They take them to the Frankfurt Fair. They sell them and make an absolute fortune. Just 2 years later, in 1457, they print their next major work, a beautiful edition of the Book of Psalms called the Psalter. At the back of that book, for the first time in history, they include a colophon, a printer's imprint, a credit line. It says proudly, printed and completed by Johann Fust and Peter Schoeffer. They put their names on it. They took all the credit. They put their brand on the invention. Gutenberg's name to this day has never been found on any piece of printing that he produced. Not the Bible, Not the indulgences. Nothing. If you were a book buyer in Europe in 1460, you would have been certain that Fust and Schoeffer were the brilliant inventors of printing. It is a visceral injustice. He is in his 60s. He is bankrupt. He has been publicly humiliated. Does he give up? You would think so. You would think he would crawl into a bottle of Riesling and disappear. But the man was unbelievably resilient. He does not leave Mainz. He scrapes together some more financing, perhaps from wealthy families who disliked Fust. He sets up a new, much smaller printing shop, the garage band version. Most scholars are convinced he printed at least one more major work, a huge Latin dictionary, an encyclopedia called the Catholicon, printed in Mainz in 1460. The typography is different from the Fust and Schoeffer shop. It shows a new technological innovation, a more efficient way of casting type. It suggests Gutenberg was still tinkering. He was still trying to improve his process even after everything he had been through. He never returned to the same level of success. Then history threw one more giant wrench into the works, the sack of Mainz in 1462. It was a disaster. There was a violent dispute between two rival archbishops over who was the rightful ruler. One of them, Adolf von Nassau, laid siege to the city. He broke through the walls. His troops went on a rampage. They burned houses. They killed citizens. The economy was destroyed. Fust's shop was disrupted, possibly damaged. But here is the paradoxical silver lining. The sack of Mainz is what broke the printing monopoly. Up until that point, Fust and Schoeffer had a stranglehold on the technology. They kept the secrets of the trade closely guarded within the city walls. When Adolf von Nassau's soldiers burst in, those trained printers fled for their lives. They grabbed their tools, their hand molds, their punches. They scattered across Europe, the diaspora of printing. They became technological refugees. They went to Cologne, Basel, Nuremberg. They walked over the Alps into Italy. Within 10 years of the sack of Mainz, you had printing presses in Venice, Paris, London. The violent destruction of his own city ensured his invention would spread across the world. The chaos accelerated the revolution, and the man responsible for the destruction became Gutenberg's savior. It is the final, quiet redemption arc. In 1465, 3 years after conquering the city, Archbishop Adolf von Nassau realized this old, broken inventor was a world historical figure. He recognized his genius. He issued a decree granting Gutenberg the title of Hofmann, Gentleman of the Court. It came with a pension, a very generous one. He was granted an annual court uniform, a large allowance of grain, 2,180 liters of grain, and 2,000 liters of wine, tax-free. That is more than 5 liters of wine a day, every day. Maybe he sold it. Maybe he had a comfortable retirement. But the Archbishop made sure the man who invented the printing press did not die a pauper. He lived his last 3 years in peace. He died in February of 1468. He was buried in the Franciscan church in his beloved Mainz. The grave is not there. The church was damaged and eventually demolished. His grave is lost to history. We have no idea where his remains are. We do not even have a portrait. Not a single contemporary image. Every painting of Gutenberg was made up 100 years or more after he died. He is a ghost. He gave us the technology for mass memory. In the process, he was almost completely forgotten himself. He dissolved into his invention. Let us look at that legacy. It changed the world. That is a cliché. The impact is fundamental. Think about the world before Gutenberg. Knowledge was local. It was fragile. If a monk in a monastery in England discovered a remedy, that knowledge existed in one book. If the library burned, the knowledge was gone. There were no backups. Information degraded with every copy. If you copied astronomical charts by hand and made one error, the next person replicated it. After a few generations, the charts were dangerously inaccurate. Science was a global game of telephone. Gutenberg's press solved the telephone problem. Once you set the type for a table of data and proofread the master copy, every single one of the 1,000 copies is identical. It allows for the standardization of knowledge. That standardization is the bedrock of the scientific revolution. Scientists like Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler could build on each other's work because they were looking at the exact same printed data. You cannot have modern collaborative science without the printing press. And then, of course, there is the other big one, the Reformation. Martin Luther. We all learned that Martin Luther started the Reformation by nailing his 95 Theses to the church door. But would anyone have cared if it was not for Gutenberg's invention? Almost certainly not. There had been plenty of heretics and reformers before Luther, men like John Hus and John Wycliffe. And what did the church do? They arrested them. They burned them at the stake. Just as importantly, they hunted down and burned every copy of their writings. End of story. So what was different about Luther? Speed and volume. When Luther posted his theses in Wittenberg in 1517, his allies immediately took a copy to a local printer. Within 2 weeks, printed copies were circulating all over Germany. Within a month, they were being read in France, Spain, and England. It went viral. It was the world's first piece of viral content. The church authorities could not react fast enough. They could not build a firewall. They could not find and burn the pamphlets faster than new ones were being printed. The press completely broke their centuries-old monopoly on the distribution of information. It also weirdly fixed our languages in place. Before print, spelling and grammar were incredibly fluid. A writer in London and a writer in York would spell the same word in different ways. But printers, for purely economic reasons, wanted to sell their books to the largest possible audience. They needed to pick one dialect and standardize it. So they chose one. They made it the standard. They effectively created what became the King's English in England, or High German in Germany. The national languages we speak today were largely codified and frozen by the commercial decisions of the first generation of printers. I want to finish with a thought experiment. We tend to think of this as a great man story, that Gutenberg was this unique genius. But others were experimenting. If Gutenberg had died in that plague in Strasbourg, would we still have gotten the printing press? That is the big counterfactual. The answer is almost certainly yes, where the demand was there. The component technologies were available. Someone somewhere in Europe would have put the pieces together eventually. So was Gutenberg essential? Yes. We would have gotten a printing press, but it almost certainly would have been a much worse one. The other known experiments from that time were clunky. They used molds made of sand or inferior metal alloys. Gutenberg's specific combination of the lead, tin, and antimony alloy, and that precise adjustable hand mold, was an engineering marvel of the highest order. It was so elegant and so efficient that the fundamental design did not significantly change for nearly 400 years. Without him, we would have had printing, but it might have been slow, expensive, and blurry for another century. We might have had a low-resolution version of the Renaissance and the Reformation. Gutenberg gave us the high-definition 4K version right from the start. He did not just invent the car, he invented the Ferrari on his first try. He massively accelerated the pace of history, and he paid the price for it with his own fortune and his own name. That is the innovator's burden. It makes you think about that Mark Twain quote. He said that what the world is today, good and bad, it owes to Gutenberg. That good and bad part is key. The press gave us the scientific journal, and it gave us racist propaganda. It gave us the works of Shakespeare, and it gave us Mein Kampf. The machine itself is neutral. It is just an amplifier. It turned up the volume on humanity. It did not decide what we were going to say. It just gave us all a much, much louder voice. A megaphone for the human mind. So next time you pick up a book, or even just read a sign on the street, take a second and look at the letters themselves. The crispness, the uniformity, the perfect alignment. That is the ghost of a broke, stubborn, brilliant goldsmith from Mainz. We are all still living in the world he printed. If you enjoyed this journey into the story of the man who gave us the printed word, make sure you are subscribed to History Titans. And if you could leave us a comment or a review, it genuinely helps us keep our own little press running. Please share this with a friend who loves a story where the inventor does not get the credit until it is way too late. Thanks so much for listening. We will see you on the next one.